Welcome to the ATP Project. You're with your host, Steve and Jeff. G'day, mate.
How are you, mate?
Good. We're talking about estrogen, and we're going to bring some new information to the table, and we're going to be correlating a whole heap of stuff, Steve, because obviously we've talked about estrogen before. Very, very important hormone, not just for women, as we typically think. Obviously has huge impacts for men as well, too.
Absolutely.
But, mate, let's get into the heart of it right now. Yes. What's up with estrogen?
What's up with estrogen? Well, it's probably one of the most misunderstood hormones because estrogen is, firstly, it's made from testosterone, which is made from DHEA and then prednisolone, then at the start, cholesterol. Right. So it follows that steroidal pathway down, which is pretty much all the sex hormones are made from cholesterol. Yeah. So cholesterol is required to make estrogen. So firstly, we'll debunk that myth that cholesterol is bad because you need it. And also...
Well, people say good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Even that's a bit misleading, but it's HDL and LDL. Right? And they say that the HDL is bad.
No, the HDL is supposed to be good.
Yeah. And the LDL is supposed to be bad, but it's all about ratio.
It is.
Yeah, right.
Because LDL is made in the liver. Right. So it's made by the body, LDL. HDL...
Which is low density, is that
Yes,
right?
Low density lipoprotein.
Yep. Yeah.
And so if it's made by the body, it can't be bad. Now, LDL takes cholesterol to the tissues to be turned into things like estrogen. Right. And all those sort of things. The HDL picks up the excess, takes it back to the liver to be recirculated. Yeah. And you can boost HDL by exercising and eating more saturated fats in your diet, healthy saturated fats like the short chains.
So the reason why they say that LDL is bad and HDL is good is because the ratios are out. Really.
Correct.
It's the same as in the gut when we talk about bacteroidetes. Is that Firmicutes and bacteroidetes. Yeah. So the ratio. So what they say is that Firmicutes are bad. But not bad.
Not bad.
It's just the ratio is bad. So this is the same with estrogen, right?
It is. It is absolutely the same. Now, beautifully, we've got this enzyme called aromatase that regulates testosterone and estrogen because testosterone turns into estrogen via the enzyme aromatase, which is under gene number 10 in your body. If you're counting, we've got 23 genes, of course, gene pairs, and number 10 is what regulates aromatase, and it's one of the cytochrome P450 19A1 enzyme. Right. So it's under that similar control. So if you're completely healthy, you've got perfect estrogen and perfect testosterone levels. Right. To your sex.
So then why do we get this imbalance, Stephen? Why do we get too much of this aromatase happening?
All right. The most common cause of aromatase problems is too much of it, and it's because we're too fat. Not us two. But everyone else.
Oh, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, we're lean, super duper machines, you know.
No, well, you might be. But anyway, I think in terms of, because fat cells obviously, it's almost proliferate more fat being produced.
They do. And that's where we get to this estrogen recycling. So let's say you're a guy and let's say you've got fat on your body, you've got excess fat, okay? Aromatase is present in fat tissues, and it's more in some fats compared to others. Visceral fat has got lower levels of aromatase, so that's the fat that pops the belly out, but the subcutaneous fat has got more aromatase function.
Really?
Yeah. And in fact, if you've got down the hips here, it's even more there. So what happens is you make more estrogen. Now, if a guy gets too much estrogen, they tend to put more subcutaneous fat on. Right. Which breeds more estrogen, which breeds more. So that's one of the problem with having high estrogen, and same thing with women.
I mean, obviously you need a certain amount of fat, Steve. So, I mean, and I know that there have been ideals said before, even like the BMI, which we know is a bit of crap, right?
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, it's just a very rough measuring stick.
It is. It's a good rough.
But in terms of percentage of body fat for both men and women, is there an ideal, and I mean an updated, actually what we'd consider to be a modern science view of what is right? Because you can't walk around on this, like guys or girls that are competing. I mean, like, guys that are sort of sub 6% body fat. Yeah. I mean, that's almost, unless you're genetically, created like that. You see some people and they seem to be shredded all the time, right?
Like me.
And that's just, some people are literally lean and muscular. Yep. Other people are a bit softer. You've got your endomorphs, your mesomorphs, and your ectomorphs. But is there a sort of an ideal for men and women percentage of body fat?
There is, and it's 17 and 27, and that's using bioimpedance analysis to measure it, because there's other ways of measuring
skin folds.
Yeah, which measures how much fat's in that little pinch of skin there.
Right.
Bioimpedance measures it from your hand throughout half your body. So it's a much better representative sample than grabbing a few bits around the body. Yep. And of course the bits that you measure are only subcutaneous under the skin. Right. Visceral fat is that fat you see in guys typically that push out under the abdomen, under the stomach muscles, and it causes this big rounding here. We call it a beer belly, but it's a fat belly.
So for men, you're saying 17, and for women, 27?
That's the ideal. And there'll be people that'll write in and say, I've got 2% on my caliper testing. It's like, you got to remember that the actual cell, even a muscle cell, the cell wall is made of fat.
Right.
A phospholipid bilayer.
Yep.
So it's, that's measured with bioimpedance as well.
But I mean, for a guy that's 17% body fat through your bioimpedance, that might turn out maybe 12% through calipers.
Correct.
That makes sense. So, I mean, if we're comparing apples with apples, but effectively, again, aesthetically, and again, I know there's a lot of people that, are going to freak out.
Yep.
Don't wig out, people.
Yeah.
But in terms of, obviously, as far as health, your hormones are concerned, we're talking about insulin resistance, we're talking about estrogen to testosterone ratios, all these things, is that typically you should be relatively lean.
Yeah, of course.
That we do eat too much in the modern society. So, yeah.
Now, men, I got in trouble one seminar I gave about 15 years ago where it was termed that I was sexist, saying that women have more fat. And it's like, well, it's just a fact. And women have more fat in certain areas, like their buttocks and their breast areas, of course, and that's largely fatty tissue. So we can't avoid that. And women typically have lower muscle.
I try not to avoid it, Steve.
Yeah. Well, why would you want to avoid it? I mean, I get the pen down there.
Yeah.
That was all right. It's all right.
Okay.
We can say that.
Yeah, we can.
We can say that.
Well, Lord forbid I find women attractive.
And
I mean, one in particular, actually. I'll just let you know. Thanks,
just one.
Tony. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, same with me. It's just Beck. I don't look at any other girls at all. I didn't know they existed. Only Beck exists. So that's it. But I've got the fact is
See how I
that,
refrained on making a comment on that?
Yeah, cover my butt. Now, what estrogen does for women is quite interesting. It makes women women. Okay. Now, what I mean is it grows breast tissue, it matures the ovaries, it's good for the uterus. It exerts good benefits on a woman's brain and a man's brain, by the way. But we'll get to that. It's great for the liver. It's great for the skin and great for the bones.
Yeah, I knew that the bones were very important.
Of course.
If you get too lean, right? So, and again, what does that have to do with? Is that the cholesterol, vitamin D?
Yeah, if your cholesterol levels drop too low, your estrogen levels, you haven't got enough. That makes estrogen, of course.
Sure.
So if you become too lean, your cholesterol levels drop too low, you can't make enough estrogen.
Things become brittle, right?
Yeah, they do become brittle.
Hair, skin, bones.
It's required for collagen.
Osteoporosis is obviously a big problem, right?
Absolutely. And of course, the brain. I mean, you've got to remember, estrogen is required to convert tryptophan through to serotonin.
Right.
So they become depressed and moody.
Okay.
And this is what happens with one of the major symptoms of PMS when estrogen levels drop away. Things happen in the brain, and that's just the way it works. And of course, we know that during menopause, of course, where women lose a lot of estrogen. Yeah. In fact, I've got an interesting fact for you. Did you know that men have more estrogen than women if a woman is postmenopausal?
No, I didn't know that.
The ideal level, and we'll get into the levels and why I'm going to say this, is about 16 for a woman for estrogen postmenopausally. Yeah. But for a man, it should be about 10 to 50.
So I saw an older woman wearing a T-shirt the other day that says, I may be hot, it just comes in flashes.
Well, hot flushes are due to estrogen deficiency because we mentioned...
Is it surging, is it? Is that the problem?
Yeah, you get the dropping away of estrogen and that causes the increase or the dropping away of serotonin. Yep. Now, serotonin keeps the blood vessels nice and tight in the body. Yep. And if you drop that away, you get a massive dilation of the blood vessels, and that's what a hot flash is.
Right.
Yeah. So the way they're treated is typically with Prozac.
With Prozac?
Prozac. Because that keeps serotonin levels high and stops the hot flashes. Or the other sample is horse's urine.
Horse's urine. Why horse's urine?
Well, it's actually, to be more specific, pregnant mare's urine.
Oh, is that what you drink instead?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Look, it's beautiful.
That's a big cup, man.
It's a big horse.
Yeah.
Well, there was a drug made out of it.
How do you milk that?
Just get a catheter in and it comes out, goes.
It's just got one big udder, doesn't it, Steve?
Absolutely. And it's utterly awful to drink. Let's get into it. I'll show you the effect of that.
That's not,
because we need estrogen.
Is it still warm?
Well, I chilled it overnight because I'm not that gross.
Okay. Oh, thank goodness.
But it's funny because one of the most popular drugs was pregnant mare's urine for women, and the name
pregnant men's urine.
Mare's urine. Mare, horse.
I know. Men's urine.
Yes. Well, it's abbreviated. The drug's called Premarin. Have you heard of that?
Premarin.
Premarin.
Oh, I think I have.
That's pregnant menstruation.
Right.
Concentrate.
Right.
Yeah, so they're synthetically derived now, but in the old days you just give them.
I prefer isolate over concentrate.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the way you roll, is it?
Oh,
that's a joke.
Oh, that's so punny.
That's terrible.
Gosh, that is
At least it's a clean joke, isn't it? They don't have to cut that one out.
You know, I'm not very good at those, unfortunately.
No. Yeah. So the standard treatment for a woman who goes through menopause is to supplement back the estrogen and they give them progestin, synthetic progesterone, to balance it all out. And there's a relationship with those we'll get to a bit later. But if a woman's level of estrogen drops too low, we talked about PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. That's usually an ovulating woman that doesn't have enough estrogen because they are not ovulating much and they've got too many androgens and they can't convert the androgens through to estrogen. We saw that there was that polymorphism, a problem with aromatase, that can't convert testosterone through to estrogen. That's what happens with PCOS women. So they lose their estrogen feminine. They become, they get hirsutism and facial hair and deeper voices and become more masculine because they get more testosterone. But the estrogen is very commonly in excess in women. And this is because they're either got too much body fat or a host of other factors. And one of the things you mentioned, the gut microbiome before, there's a paper here that shows you there's 35 gut microbiome that actually increase the recirculation of estrogen. Now, this needs explanation.
Well, can I have a guess in that they're Firmicutes?
Yes, they are Firmicutes, a lot of them. Yeah, like Clostridia and those sort of things. Okay, yeah. Now, what they do is, of course, let's say you're a woman, we make all this wonderful estrogen, and then we go through our liver, detoxifies it, goes into our bile, and goes into our gut.
Right.
And then we poo it out in the morning after our morning coffee. And that's got bile in it, which contains all the estrogens. Now, if you've got bugs in your gut, too many of them, they secrete this enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. Now, we don't have to worry about that. What that does is it takes the conjugated estrogen and recirculates it in the body. Yeah. So they get it back to themselves again. So it's recirculated. So,
and this is, again, we're working in sports arena, helping people to, tidy up their diet, give them advice on terms of what supplements they should use. You'd have two people come in and they're both training hard, even the same sort of training, both eating the same sort of thing. Yeah. Yet one of them could lose weight and one of them couldn't.
Correct.
It's because these are the differences, right, that probably, I didn't know back in the early 2000s in terms of why everything would be the same, but yet some people would. I mean, it's one reason, not the reason, but it's one reason, right?
Exactly. I mean, we've talked about calories in and calories out. And I always argue that point is it in the mouth or in the body?
Right.
Because you've got to remember, if you eat something, it doesn't necessarily get to your body. Yeah. If you eat, for example, fibre, it goes straight through you, insoluble fibre. But if you have even a calorific food and you've got more Firmicutes such as Methanobrevibacter, you can look that one up, but that draws more calories out of the food.
Yeah, right.
So you eat the same amount of food.
And they're really good for babies. Right.
Yes,
I mean, babies want Firmicutes because that helps them to grow and really helps to feed them, and that's what they need, right?
Absolutely.
So, obviously, if you're trying to lose weight and you're a sort of a, woman or a man in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, you kind of don't want too many of those.
You don't want too many of those because if you have too many of those, you have to cut your calories lower because you're going to absorb more of them. So and then of course you get hungry and then you just blow your diet because you're too hungry and you stop off at Macca's on the way home. You're just too hungry. You can't hack it.
Well, we've gone out to the tribe and we've asked a few questions, Steve-O.
These are good ones.
Can I pin some questions?
Go for it.
All right. So this one's from Tracy. I'd love to know what estrogen dominance looks like and how to counteract it, please.
Sure. If a woman, and Tracy's a woman, we'll assume. And
may not be.
All right. Well,
I knew a Tracy that was a guy.
Well, Dick
but
Tracy.
Anyway,
it's different.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. They're from a women's group. Well, I'm going to answer it from a female and male point of view.
Right.
Okay, so let's say you're a woman, you got too much estrogen, which means you may not have enough progesterone, okay, which regulates estrogen. Then you will tend to, if you've got too much estrogen, put on more subcutaneous fat, which is fat under the skin. Yep. So you see these women, they may have larger breasts, larger hips, and they become more hourglassy and sort of too hourglassy because they get saddlebags, all that sort of, what's the politically correct word for cellulite now? Is it hail damage or is that the one we're not supposed to say? No, that's the
opposite.
one.
Cellulite's, you're allowed to say cellulite.
Cellulite, okay, that's right. The hail damage. So you get this massive amount of fat in these certain areas. And that's what a woman would look like. Also, they get more moody because there's too much estrogen, not enough progesterone to make dopamine and all that sort of thing. And also it predisposes them to other conditions long term, which are quite dangerous for your health.
Right.
You know, the ones I'm talking about. So you get too much unopposed estrogen.
Right.
And so they get the moods, they get the too much feminine body shape, like too much subcutaneous fat, and they get obviously problems with their long-term effects of metabolic diseases,
right?
Which we won't go into too much. We can mention them, can we? Starts with C.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, well, it can predispose you to cancers such as breast cancer, and that's why the first line treatment for a woman with too much estrogen, if you've got cancer and you go to the doctor, is Aromatase, which is a drug that blocks aromatase, and so you get lower estrogen. So that's the main problem, and you get also period problems too. Now, if you're a bloke and you've got too much estrogen, basically you're more predisposed to stroke, heart disease, constant fatigue, increased fat tissue, low libido, erectile dysfunction, loss of muscle tone, enlarged prostate, and increased breast size. So that's estrogen dominance in a man.
And again, we don't want to see that.
We don't want to see that.
No.
And the picture there you can see is shows you a man with the skinny legs and the big gut.
Right.
And they look like an apple shaped, and that's too much estrogen. And that's usually men who are overweight.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's
Kiralee, I'd be interested in what to do if you have low estrogen and natural ways to increase it.
Well, this is good. I mean, Kiralee, last week we did a podcast on PCOS, which we talked a little bit about that, but there's lots of better ways we can increase estrogen in the body naturally. The first thing we need to do is to get insulin levels down. Okay, because insulin has an androgenic effect on women, and it blocks that aromatase enzyme. So and
it's very anabolic too.
It's very anabolic, yeah.
In fact, it's more anabolic than testosterone, that hormone. The problem is the anabolism doesn't just mean for muscle tissue; it can mean for fat tissue too.
Correct.
So by lowering the amount of sugars in your diet, Steve, and maybe increasing fibers, proteins, things like that.
That's exactly the way to do it. And eat if you want to go to the best. It depends on how extreme you want to go, but the best diet for this, and we talked about this last week, was the ketogenic diet in the studies. There was a whole lot of them are good. Low carb diets, they're all good. The ketogenic diet was the best one. So you might evaluate and say, look, I'm not that bad, and ketogenic diet seems tough, so I'll do a Mediterranean diet minus the flour, and that's a good start. Having fruits and vegetables, lots of fish, lots of colourful vegetables. There's nothing wrong with that.
True or false, Steve? The body cannot store fat when insulin is not in the body.
And there's always insulin in the body.
Sure, but in terms of secretion of insulin?
Correct. You need insulin to store fat.
Yeah.
So if you keep insulin levels low, this other methanobrevibacti and those bacteria downregulate. Yeah. So when you've got low insulin, and also you get malonyl-CoA increasing, which is an enzyme that burns fat. So you really, really want to increase the carnitine palmityl transferase enzyme, which is the result of that. And that gets fats into cells to be burned as energy. So if insulin's high, you're storing. If insulin's low, you're spending.
Okay.
Now, just keep it really simple. So keeping insulin low means exercise, of course.
Good.
Because that means get stuff in cells without insulin, and also insulinic foods like high carbohydrate diets. And, that's pretty much it. They're the ones that spike up insulin.
Is terrible.
Oh, they're terrible.
So, and when you eat fats and proteins, obviously that slows down the digestion of your food, because quick digestion as well too. It's easy for the body to convert that to energy to use, to replace glycogen and what have you. But the thing is that, the amount of glycogen that you need is actually relatively small. And even if you're exercising, a lot, it doesn't take a lot to replace that either, does it?
No, it doesn't take a lot to replace that. And glycogen, even when it becomes depleted,
which is stored energy inside the cell. From eating carbohydrates.
Correct. It's stored in the muscles of the liver.
Yep.
And of course, you can simply burn that off when you go for a run in the morning, and then you start tapping into fat stores, which is what most people want.
Yeah.
And so to get over that, you fast before you exercise. So that's why I always say, get up first thing in the morning, have a big jug of water in the hot weather, and go for that run, swim, gym, whatever you do, and do the exercise. And that's the best thing for you to keep your fat levels down and to keep estrogen levels, I'll say, healthy, because we don't want estrogen levels to be high. We want it to be healthy.
Yep.
And we need it in men too. In fact, if you've got low estrogen and you're a man, this is what can happen to you. You get erectile dysfunction, bone health problems, you get regulation of fat mass problems, you get brain dysfunction like depression, you get hyperlipidemia, high cholesterol, and your skin health degrades because estrogen's good for your skin.
Very good.
Yeah, so it's great, and increased collagen production. So that's low estrogen and high estrogen. So you got to remember, it's what they call a U-shaped relationship. In one of the papers I said earlier, it means if it's too low, you're bad. Just right down the bottom here. Too high at the other side is bad again.
Bell
so
curve.
you want to be under there in the bell curve, and that's for a woman too. Yeah.
Next one from Tanja. What can I do to manage early pre-menopause, estrogen dominance, and histamines driving chronic migraine?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, it says perimenopause. So in perimenopause, that's when your eggs are like conking out, like a this is a bit crude, but like a car running out of petrol. It splutters. You ovulate and then you don't, then you you know, that sort of thing. So you get this periodic ovulation now. Now, what that causes, of course, is when you ovulate, you get a spike of estrogen afterwards and progesterone. And if you don't ovulate, you don't get that spike in estrogen or progesterone. So you get this decrease in estrogen. Now, when estrogen decreases in the body, you get chronic migraines.
Right.
Now, because estrogen, and that's why women suffer 3 times as many migraines as men.
Yes.
Because of the estrogen fluctuations. There's a study, and I'll put a graph up here showing the estrogen levels in men, and they found that when they're much higher, they get much more migraines.
Right.
So it's heavily associated with that. So with women, when they're...
Doesn't it do something to the blood, make it more sticky, right?
It does.
Is it the platelets in the blood? What is it?
It does 2 things. Estrogen regulates calcitonin gene-related peptide.
Right.
Now, that's a hormone that keeps the blood vessels nice and toned.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if that sort of goes away, you get this massive vasodilation in the brain, which, of course, if you think a skull is hard, your brain can't expand. So you get this massive intracranial pressure, which triggers migraines. Okay. So that's where you need estrogen for that. So in the studies, what they do is they give them low-dose estrogen cream, and it stops migraines because it keeps serotonin.
From a natural point of view, and going back to Kira Lee's question as well too, I mean, outside of obviously diet and exercise and regulating, which is really good, some of the herbs, Steve, that can be used as well too, I mean, specifically for peri and menopausal women, things typically that men would use to increase testosterone levels have a beneficial effect on women through the luteinizing hormone to produce estrogen. So again, things like tribulus and other what you would call testosterone inducing ingredients. Shilajit's also one of the that you can use. But mind you, you wouldn't be recommending this for everybody. No. And again, this is typically where it's always really good to work with a healthcare practitioner that you agree with. Now, that could be a doctor. I mean, integrated doctors, I like them, Steve. You know, your naturopaths, those sorts of people can actually help look at your hormone load and then look at some, I mean, outside of diet and exercise, which should always come first.
Yes.
Then you can have a look at, you know, other factors, explore natural, you know, sort of methods first, natural herbs and things like that have got some good science backed up behind them, Steve, which, you know, you and I are doing a whole series at the moment on a glossary of terms of ingredients that are used for certain things, but tribulus is certainly one, shilajit's certainly another one that you could potentially look at. Nettles and that sort of thing too. They're terrific. And the reason why they're terrific, and you might think, why is a woman taking a testosterone booster to boost estrogen? Because you've got to remember that a testosterone booster typically increases luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone and in men and women. The difference between men and women at that point. So they both do the same point there, but then, shock horror, men have got gonads, testes.
Women have gonads too. They're
but they're
innies,
innies,
not outies. Yeah, can we say that?
And obviously, then that will produce more estrogen. This is why young girls, and I used to see this all the time when I used to be selling supplements. Girls would come in and go, "Oh, my boyfriend's taking this. He's increasing in his testosterone. I want to build more muscle tissue. I'm going to take tribulus as well too." And it's like, no, the exact opposite is going to happen. But that's very beneficial, as I said, if you're going through menopause. So
it is. And menopause is the classic time to drive up more LH and FSH to get a regulation of the remaining eggs you've got in your ovaries out and in a regular sequence. So that's the best thing you can do for yourself.
Okay, so this one's from Trish. What is the relationship between estrogen and progesterone in our bodies? Well, you've kind of covered this.
A little bit, but even better. Progesterone regulates aromatase. Now, we're hoping people know the aromatase converts testosterone through to estrogen, and progesterone is one of the regulatory things for that. So that's a very good relationship. Also, progesterone opposes excessive estrogen. So, post-ovulation, if you're a woman and you've ovulated, and progesterone goes up quite significantly, as well as estrogen. So you get that lovely regulation of estrogen. And, if a woman is estrogen dominant, then they could be, because they're not ovulating, because when you ovulate, that's where all your progesterone comes out. You look at those graphs and you'll see the 28-day graphs for a woman, and you'll see that ovulation hits and you get this massive surge in progesterone, and that regulates it all.
When you surge in progesterone, how does that make you feel?
Terrific.
Yeah.
Except then, of course, your little egg, going around day 21, let's say it doesn't get ovulated. Guess what happens to the little egg? Dies. Oh. Just dies. Comes down the fallopian tube, goes into the uterus and dies. Stops producing progesterone, obviously. So you start feeling a bit crappy.
Yep.
They call that PMS.
Yep.
That's what it is.
So that's the cycle. So how do you support progesterone production?
Sure. The main way to support progesterone production is by driving ovulation. Now, there's lots of things that can drive ovulation. The most famous herb for that is Vitex.
Yes.
And that's a classic one for driving ovulation to drive up progesterone. Now, also, you can have brassica foods with that.
Like broccoli,
cauliflower, those sort of things. And what they do is they help detoxify the estrogen.
Yeah.
So in a way, it boosts the effect of progesterone. Because look for things that boost progesterone as well as detoxify estrogen at the same time. And that's what you want to do in most people, because most people are estrogen dominant because they're either overweight or they have dysregulation of aromatase. So it's a problem.
Claire asks, how healthy estrogen levels support women with hypertrophy?
Yeah, they do. Healthy levels of estrogen support hypertrophy because it's an anabolic hormone as well. You've got to remember, particularly, there's three types of estrogen, by the way. There's E1, E2, E3. E2 is estradiol, and that's the one that's very closely mimicking testosterone.
Right.
So in women, you do get estrogen levels at healthy levels, not high levels, at healthy levels, which support anabolic muscle growth. Now, if you had high levels, you'll still get the anabolic muscle growth, but you'll get the fat growth as well.
Right.
And most people don't want that.
No.
They don't want to be big. They want to be toned.
Yes.
And so you get healthy levels of estrogen, and that won't put on body fat in women, excessive body. They'll still have more fat than men.
Sure.
Because of the breasts and those sorts of things, but they won't have excessive body fat. And so you really need to do that. Now, for a woman to lean down, and I've seen this, that where they purposely block estrogen with drugs, and it's a nightmare.
Before ATP science came on the scene, estrogen blockers were very, very, very popular. It's not until we started educating people about estrogen detoxification, detox, which is way better because you get all the benefits of estrogen with a reduced, negatives, right?
Yeah.
And it's like anything. I mean, naturally, hormones in men and women are there. Estrogen is very, very important. You don't want to hold back the ocean, as I say, because, you can't hold it back forever. And unfortunately, you take a pendulum, you hold it back one way. What ends up happening? You can't hold it when it eventually goes. It swings over the other way, as opposed to, as you say, being down the bottom of the U-shaped curve.
The U-shaped upper. It's funny because one of the papers I've got here, the title is U-shaped relationship between estrogen and it says that absolutely directly. That's what you want. But people who take estrogen blockers, they don't even consider the gut microbiome, which is scary because that's where you start.
Yeah, right.
You get rid of some of the excessive Firmicutes there with polyphenols, which is just healthy foods and spices and those sorts of things.
I think people understand modbiotics a lot more than what they used to. And I think that understanding of probiotics, postbiotics, and modbiotics now is a very exciting field. And I think there's ways that we can obviously support a microbiome that creates the body that we want.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Emily, how can I improve my estrogen progesterone ratio, specifically increase progesterone? All right. So we mentioned that.
We did mention that with things like the Vitex, which specifically boosts progesterone, because progesterone, as I said, when you ovulate on day 14, that's when all your progesterone comes out. And it's supposed to be cyclic.
Yep.
Progesterone is supposed to be almost zero from days 0 to 14 of your cycle.
Right.
And from 14 to 28, it goes this massive spike. And if you fall pregnant during that ovulation at day 14, when you're quite fertile, then progesterone levels will stay high. And you'll have that wonderful pregnancy buzz that some women get. Some, not all. That they get this massive high. Because progesterone, it stands for progestation. That was the biggest hormone when you're gestating. So it makes sense, doesn't it?
Cool.
So
what else? So
detoxify estrogen, like we said, with the gut microbiome, brassica foods, detoxify, and keep yourself lean.
Keep yourself lean.
Because the fat cells are making estrogen.
Okay.
So it's funny because when they tested this, it was about 2006, where they went round to plastic surgeons and they take fat from women's thighs and they measure the aromatase activity.
So what are you talking about from liposuction clinics?
Yeah, and then they examined how much aromatase is in what fats.
Yeah.
And the worst ones are around your hips here in women, the saddlebags. Yeah, it was 6 to 30 times higher than fat, like visceral fat in men.
Wow.
So it really does make loads of estrogen, and it acts like an autocrine, which means it acts on itself. So you make this estrogen, estrogen's fat soluble, goes back into the fat and grows more fat.
We used to sell a cream, Steve, that actually Matt had worked on, perfectly designed for penetrating the skin.
Yep.
And it's so funny. So many people have such a hard time actually understanding that, but yet doctors actually give troches and testosterone creams and all the rest of it that you put actually onto your skin that get through. Yeah. It's the same as mercury, you know. Matt used to joke about this all the time. Like, you don't believe things can get through the skin? Well, here, hold this mercury for me. Right? It's just like, but I mean, again, just the idiocracy of some people. I mean, what else can you do now? I mean, obviously that's gone. So
they're the gold standard thing, is because they target those areas.
I know,
directly.
right? And because they typically have very poor circulation.
Yeah.
So, you know, you try and go in the front door.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that doesn't work. You've actually got to go direct to that level.
It's tough to get rid of those because they're constantly pumping out estrogen, which is constantly keeping.
I had a friend of mine, back when I used to own the supplement in the retail store, and she was a lovely little girl. And my gosh, the amount of time she spent on the treadmill, she was running herself ragged, literally running. Right? I mean, she was doing a little bit of resistance training, which we probably need to do more of. She was doing it to get rid of this little bit of fat that she had on her head, and she just couldn't do it because it had created this sort of little pocket where it was just nothing would, no fat burner would work, the diet wasn't working. I mean, she got leaner and smaller and skinnier, but just she kept this little thing. How frustrating for her.
It's terrible. It's so tough to get rid of those fat areas. I mean, that's why there's been a popular rise in fat freezing, cryolitis.
Yeah, actually, I've seen that. Does that work, Steve?
Yeah, it does.
Does it?
It drops it by about 40%.
Okay.
Now,
well, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, up to 40%. So 20 to 40 is what they state in the literature, which is, enough to...
How does it work?
Well, what it does is fat cells, if you put fat in a fridge, right?
Yeah.
At 4 degrees, it'll typically go hard, right?
Right.
You put water in the fridge and it stays liquid.
Yeah.
Now, your body's fat and water. Okay, I'll keep it really simple. If you can specifically freeze the fat at negative 10 degrees, which is what you can do, fat cells basically got a little bit of water in there, they freeze and they die. They are not very good in the cold.
Now, is it, what do they call that word, Steve? A where the cell actually dies and goes, as opposed to when you sometimes lose weight, you empty the fat cell. Now, if it stays empty for a long period of time, apoptosis?
Apoptosis, it can.
So, but does this create apoptosis where the cell actually is gone? Because it's like you've got a cup, right?
Yeah.
And you train and you empty out the cup, and so then the cup shrinks, but it's still there.
Still there, yeah.
But you want to get rid of it. Now, it will die after time. If it's not used, the body then apoptosis occurs, right?
It does, yeah. It takes a long time. Now, fat freezing, it kills it over about a 4 to 8 week period.
Really?
So, yeah. So, no, it works. It works. There's literature.
Well, it's better than lipo, right?
Well, it is. Now, when you say better, it's safer and quicker and cheaper and easier, and it's a walk-in, walk-out procedure, and it takes literally about 45 minutes.
Wow.
A little bit painful, but certainly you don't have any downtime. Now, lipo I'll only use the word better because it gets rid of 95% of the fat cells in half an hour and it's gone forever. Yeah. It's just gone in a jar.
Problem is, I've seen weird things with regrowth, like where they don't get it all properly, and it sort of like comes back, and then you got strange fat pockets, and it kind of looks weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
Whereas with this one here,
there's no side effects, because if you think of a bulge of fat, you put it through this clamp thing that freezes it, so it gets the whole area, so it just dies off. A fair bit dies
slowly.
off.
How quick?
Takes about 4 to 8 weeks to get. You start seeing results after 4 weeks because you kill them, and then the fat slowly dissipates into the body and then gets burned, metabolized.
I mean, there's always the piper to pay.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll say, because if you get your lipo, okay, so you sit there and you eat donuts and all the rest of it, but you have potentially golden staph, you've got big downtime, you've got a heck of a lot of pain as well too. I mean, they literally get in there and there. Have you seen it, Steve?
Yeah, Doug used to do it.
It's not a gentle process.
No.
Right? And then, as I said, the weird fat, if they don't get everything and you've got pockets of fat where some fat cells sort of come back.
Because they can fill up, they can expand.
Well, but then you've kind of got like, instead of like a fat cell, sort of like being like this, you've kind of like got all over the place, right?
And there's now newer techniques to prevent that a little bit.
Yeah.
But like laser lipo, which is a little heating laser on the end, which destroys the fat cells as you suck it, so it's a bit better. But you've got to remember, this has only been around since the 70s, lipos.
Yeah, right.
It was started by a dermatologist, I believe.
Really?
Yeah. Should have researched that side of things. No, we talk about lipo today. But I think it was in Italy too, and I think the guy is still around who invented it. But you kind of get the idea.
Send you a lipo.
Yeah, because it's like your fat's there 1 minute, you inject it full of local anesthetic and usually high levels of adrenaline. Adrenaline constricts the blood vessels, stop bleeding and stop bruising. So they've lessened the side effects. You suck the fat out and it's gone. And the end of the estrogen thing, all that sort of stuff.
That comes back, Steve. It can. If you eat donuts. And that's the problem as well too. Without the effort put in to actually get rid of it.
Yeah.
Many times people just revert. They haven't changed they've created a Band-Aid for a bullet hole. They need to change the diet and everything else first. And what it doesn't address, Steve, is the microbiome.
Nope.
Because if you've still got a higher level of Firmicutes demanding and craving the sorts of foods that got you there in the first place, that's how, I guess, nature works, is that you kill off those bad things. I'm really interested in fact, I actually had a meeting yesterday with a crowd that we're very, very much aligned into looking at aspects of the gut, remodeling and remapping the gut. Some great work there, and we've got great results, but we're looking at taking that to the next level.
It's awesome, isn't it?
I'm very excited about that. Anyway, I'll get off. So then we've got Marina, effects we can observe of high and low estrogen, e.g. changes in mucus, temperature, mood, health, estrogen effects, and other hormones. Now, we've answered some of these, Steve.
A little bit, but I'll address the temperature and the mucus. I think she's talking about vaginal mucus. Basically, if you've got low estrogen, you will dry up.
Right.
You get vaginal atrophy and vaginal dry.
Well, that happens a lot, obviously, with menopause, perimenopause.
Because they lose estrogen.
Yeah, and look, that can have impacts with relationship issues, and I mean, just overall feelings. So.
Libido too. Temperature is interesting because estrogen also puts a little bit of a handbrake on the thyroid.
So again, you've kind of got this vicious circle happening.
Exactly. Right? You don't want too much estrogen. You really don't. But you don't want too little either. But too much of it puts a handbrake. Progesterone speeds it up.
Right.
So you've got those nice yin yang things going on there. Yang is the heating and active side of things. Yin is the cold and dark side of things. And estrogen is very yin and very feminine. And yang hormones are like testosterone and progesterone. So it does slow your thyroid down. So, and this is it's not pick on doctor day, but you go into the doctors, you've got a low thyroid, you go, well, here's some thyroxine for you. Well, what caused it? The address, it could be high estrogen. And if you just live with high estrogen, that causes all sorts of other problems in your body, but we fix your thyroid. So, it's very important that if you've got low thyroid, for example, and a lot of women do, because they've got more estrogen. And so that you need to check this sort of stuff out. So it very much relates to temperature, mood, of course, to make serotonin, your health. Women feel better if they've got more estrogen in their body because that's exactly what the body's designed for with all those parts of the body.
Lisa asks, how can we tell the difference between estrogen dominance, high estrogen, and relative estrogen dominance, low progesterone, with or without testing?
Yeah.
And does elevated estrogen cause breakthrough bleeding mid-cycle?
Yes, it does, to answer that last question. So if you've got low progesterone, firstly, let's talk about with the testing, because you don't just go to your doctor and get a blood test. A lot of doctors are resistant to giving women hormonal blood tests because they go, it just changes all the time. So what you've got to do is measure it on a specific day of the month. Day 21 is the day you want, which is where progesterone is allegedly at its highest. Supposed to be, if you ovulate. So, and most women, young women, ovulate every month. Not every month, but that's when you test for it. So you can certainly test for it. estrogens, you can get a hormonal breakdown. But let's say you don't want to test for it, then you look at those symptoms we've talked about. If you're estrogen dominant, we talk about the low thyroid function, you get constipation, you get depression, you can get anxiety, you lose the hourglass figure and that sort of thing. And if you've a high estrogen, you look at all the other factors with the fats and all those sorts of things and everything we've discussed. So there's two ways of doing it. You can look at yourself or you can get a blood test. I'd prefer the blood test because it's independent.
Yeah.
And that's where medicine can be useful.
And subjective it can be a problem. So, whereas obviously,
absolutely,
facts don't lie, man. I think Monique says here the relationship between estrogen and histamine.
Easy. Estrogen is required for the production of histamine.
Right.
So if you've got too much estrogen, you could have too much histamine in your body.
Right.
Histamine is a chemical that can degranulate mast cells and leads to mucus and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, like snotty and like just sneezing and hay fever, that sort of stuff, right?
And excessive brain fog and that sort of thing too. So, and just plays havoc with your mind, histamine.
Right. Yeah, okay.
So, like antihistamines make you drowsy. Okay. So, if you're having problems sleeping or something like that, there could be a problem with estrogen and histamine.
And lastly, Alex asks, related to estrogen dominance and low estrogen, I'd love to know how to identify estrogen imbalances, including when to get blood tests and why.
Can we address that one?
Yep. Should we get bloods when symptoms are weak to confirm, or should we wait for symptoms to be obvious? What day of our cycle should we get our bloods done?
Well, we've just done that, day 21.
There you go.
So that was a good one. And we've talked about the symptoms, so that was a good one too. Now, I think there's page 2.
Oh, Steve-o.
So we'll start with Lisa there. If you want.
All right. As women age, we are told that it's most likely we lead to having low progesterone and have estrogen dominance. What if mid-40s progesterone is still optimum but estrogen is low? What symptoms would you have? Acne, fatigue, question mark.
Yeah, that's good. It's exactly what they said. You would have androgen excess symptoms, which can be acne and it can be fatigue and depression. You've got to remember androgens are better suited for us men, high levels. Yep. We can tolerate quite high levels of testosterone as men, and testosterone is a very powerful androgen. And in fact, when we get higher levels of testosterone in men, it's actually healthier for us. Yep. Our highest testosterone is when we're 18 to 19, and we feel terrific as men. As we age...
I feel terrific being a man.
Yes. It's much better.
I feel sorry for half the population.
Yes. So if a woman gets high testosterone, you think, well, how do they feel? They would feel awful. And when I say testosterone, I mean, progesterone as well. Because if you've got low estrogen, you've usually got high testosterone. Because remember, there's a relationship between those two. We said early on. Yep. And so if you've got low estrogen, you've typically got high testosterone because it's not being converted through like the PCOS women. And so they suffer all sorts of mental health issues, body dysmorphic issues. Acne is a classic one. Hirsutism, you get facial hair. And all these things are terribly disturbing for women because women are people are very conscious about how they look. And particularly if a woman becomes androgenized, they become very sensitive to that because there's a stigma associated with that, unfortunately. And that's one of the things when I was in practice I saw a lot of. Women they say, I've got this little bit of, and I'd look at them and go, really? God, you can barely see it, but they're very self-conscious of it. It's like, we talked about before, having a little bit of fat there, like your friend who had that little bit here. They're very, medically, it doesn't matter a shit. If they've got a little bit here, it's like, just sits there. It doesn't,
Is that your medical opinion?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't, if you've got, this, and guys are the worst at this, and I'm going to pick on men now.
Oh. We're an equal opportunity.
Bloody hell.
We hate everybody equally.
I don't know how many guys would come in with a spot on their arm and they go, look at this spot here, and they have this massive belly covering the table. And it's like, what about that spot here that's going to, you can't even see your junk. Yep. It's that, and this is very dangerous.
Did you ask
fat.
to see it?
No, I didn't. Didn't want to see it under that.
Well, why were you trying to see their junk?
No. I've had to see junk in the past. I don't want
Did you?
Oh, of course you do.
Did you wear gloves?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
You get asked for that sort of stuff occasionally. Luckily, naturopaths, it's usually unfortunate the doctors you have to,
Oh, that was at work.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Occasionally,
that changes everything.
Occasionally, you'd have to look. Yeah. If they think they've got Klinefelter syndrome or something where there's
what?
Oh, smaller testes. Oh. And you have to see whether they're the right size or not.
Do you know, Steve?
Yeah, you can tell.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you got a measuring device or something? You just measure them up against yours. They look a little bit smaller than mine.
They're the size of almonds in guys. It can be very small.
I might have a problem, Steve.
Yeah. Have a look for almond-sized testes.
Really?
Absolutely.
Almonds?
Yeah, they're almond-sized. They're very small. It's
Really?
almost like non-existent. You can almost not see them.
I think I might have a medical emergency.
Okay. So the crew are laughing now and crying in the background. It's a medical condition that these guys have. Yeah. And they get...
like blanched almonds or...
Skinned almonds,
Skin? The skin. Not the skin nuts again. Not skin.
They're just running.
Oh, my God.
Red. It's just true. I mean, imagine if we had to do a podcast on this. Everyone would just be laughing for 45 minutes.
Oh, wouldn't it be good?
It'd be funny.
Who needs Patch Adams?
But yeah, exactly. But I mean, guys that have that, it means they've got stuffed up hormones because the testes make hormones.
Yeah.
And they just, it's quite bad. Yeah, I've had to see that before. I've never had to give a prostate exam. Oh. We got taught how to do it, and that was it as far as I was concerned. I was never doing that again.
No, on a dummy.
That's, on a dummy. Well, they actually showed you. They didn't do it. You didn't have to do it. What?
Yeah.
No, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, the guy wasn't very smart at all.
This is 1995. I did all this sort of training. Luckily now...
Get up on the table. Why?
It's all changed now.
You got to check your prostate.
In naturopathic training.
Okay.
There's so many jokes I could say. It'd just be red pen. There's a lot of jokes here, but doctors mainly check the prostate now. It's very common and very unfortunate where it's located, the prostate. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it. Not a good location. It's hard to get to. What was the question here?
It's just actually enabling my conspiracy theory that all doctors are aliens.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a fascination with that, don't they?
They do.
But it is important, actually, that you go get it checked.
Absolutely. Get your prostate checked.
It's one of the leading causes of death in men, isn't it?
It is the leading cause of cancer death in men. Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of people get prostatic cancer and they die with the cancer, not of the cancer. So
sure. Because it's a slow, normally. Not always, but normally. But yeah, I mean, and it is, I mean, we make light of everything and joke about everything. But I think in terms of for men and for women, there are some key things that you probably need to look at as you get older. And unfortunately for men, prostate is one of the ways to do it. Outside of getting the jab, Steve.
The jab, yes. You can measure. Oh, that one. Okay,
yeah,
good. I thought we were going into controversy.
No. Oh, no. You can measure hormones, correct? So you can get but that won't tell you specifically if it's your prostate, or will it?
It won't. You have to measure prostatic-specific antigens or a PSA
Can you
test.
go and get that done?
Absolutely.
Because I'm telling you the truth. I reckon the reason why most men will not go and get their prostate checked. A lot of men, Steve, don't want things to be shoved up their rectum.
Weirdly, I know. It's one of those things.
But women are sitting there going, hang on a minute. Bunch of babies.
Yeah, I know.
They're like, you try having a baby, like you've got 1,000 people doing all sorts of things down there and,
I'm on the pill. I can't get pregnant, so.
You're on the male pill.
Huh? I'm just on the contraceptive pill. I don't want to get pregnant.
Oh. Okay, Steve. You think, therefore you are.
Exactly. Well,
but no. Sorry, is there another way to test it?
PSA is a classic blood test. It's very simple, non-invasive.
Really?
Yeah. And you get a blood test for PSA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we promote that?
Well, we don't. We should.
I don't.
I get a test every 5 years.
But I mean, Steve, you don't see that. You go see your doctor and get him to.
No, it's a blood test, PSA.
See how I use 2 fingers there instead of 1?
Yes. Hopefully the camera caught that.
Should be 1 finger.
Yes, it should be 1 finger.
You've changed doctors.
Small.
Okay.
Oh, dear.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
So, but with women, high androgens, they get, as she said, the acne is a bad one. Because when you get too much androgens in the body, the skin grows too much because testosterone's a growth hormone. It grows off the pilosebaceous unit where your little hairs come out, and it blocks it off, and you get a build-up of an acne here called propionibacterium acne, and that's acne. Okay. So that's where androgens come from. That's why, men, or typically boys and young girls, when they go through our, 16, we get loads of acne. Yeah. Just because testosterone surges through the roof.
It's annoying.
It is annoying because that's the time.
I had really bad skin when I was young.
I had bad skin right up here.
I had bad skin. I've still got scars on my temple, on my temple area.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it was horrible. Yeah, well, we did a podcast on that, and maybe you should really investigate before you go on that. There might be other ways and things. Zinc was actually fantastic. Obviously, making sure that you're keeping the area clean, but not over clean,
No.
because that's a problem as well too. Do you know what I used to do, Steve? Terrible. I had no idea.
What did you do?
I used hydrogen peroxide.
Well, they use benzoyl peroxide.
Yeah,
now.
but I think I used too strong. I mean, my hair was bleached. I had like it's bleached hair, at the front, which then started a trend at the school.
Yep.
So I was like, okay. So it's just the fringe area. Oh man, we're just such a wanker.
Weirdly, and this is for the bodybuilders thing, is you got to keep away from branched chain amino acids, because they increase mammalian targeted rapamycin complex 1, which is a chief driver of acne. Now, that's also the driver for muscle growth.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think most guys would probably choose muscle over skin.
Probably. But if you've got...
Don't just say paper bag me.
Yeah. And same with dairy. That's got IGF-1 in it, so you keep off dairy foods and grains and sugars.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is that, I swore black and blue that chocolate used to make it worse. And again, if you think of chocolate, and I think the way that it made it worse, and is that when you're eating a lot of sugar, your immune system lowers, right? Which means then obviously that the bacteria and all the rest of it is probably left a little less unchecked.
Absolutely. But you got to remember, chocolate itself usually has dairy and sugar.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah.
And there was a study done in 1969 on this, actually.
So if you had bad skin, and I guess this is sort of women, men, whatever. Yeah. If you got bad skin, what would you do in terms of your diet, nutrition, everything?
Paleo diet to start with.
Would you?
No grains, no dairy.
Yeah.
That's just an absolute thing. I would then start to look at supplements like zinc.
Yeah.
And remember, you can get a blood test from zinc. Should be 10 to 24 in your body. It should be over 20. So you can get a blood test for zinc to measure your zinc levels.
Yep.
Make sure that's healthy for a myriad of reasons, especially for a young boy, because you may want to edit this, but young boys, when they ejaculate, you lose a lot of zinc.
They don't do that, Steve.
Teenage boys don't do that?
No.
Oh.
As a good boys.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. Leave it alone.
Yeah, I know, but
seriously, leave it alone.
They need to leave it alone, because otherwise they lose too much zinc.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but you're losing, when you're with a woman too. So, and with teenage boys.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was growing up, that's what we did. But you do lose a lot of zinc in those days. Trying to get back to this.
You would have been zinc deficient, Steve.
Come on, would have been. Absolutely.
Your fingernails would have been just like white and cracked.
I did have white spots on them in the old days.
Yeah.
I'm married now, so there's none of that going on. So
no, you get married to stop having sex.
That's right.
All right.
No, so get another question.
Let's go with Joanna. So with HRT, is there a preferred type of estrogen? I'm taking calcium deglutarate and rosemary to help with detox.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
That's great, because calcium deglucarate stops that beta-glucuronidase and helps detoxify estrogen. So does rosemary. It's excessively good for getting rid of estrogen. Now, going back to HRT, HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy.
There's a lot of people on HRT now, Steve, and not just for menopause, but for other reasons as well too.
Absolutely. Now, female hormones and male hormones are best absorbed either with an injection or as a cream, and you measure the changes in the blood levels, because surprise, surprise, things are absorbed through the skin, and you measure the changes, and in that way you can take natural progesterone and natural estrogen, not synthetic progestins, and orally, because when you take a hormone orally, it hits the liver quite hard, and you can get liver cancers from taking oral hormones too much, except for things like DHEA is okay, melatonin, and a few others. But typically, oral hormones are not recommended. For guys, you can get testosterone creams or subcutaneous or intramuscular testosterone slow release ones like Undecanoate or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's for men for HRT, which is, that's what it's about.
I mean, a lot of guys go to their doctor and get Cystolon 250, which is a slow release sort of multi-phase sort of testosterone. I mean, again, if you need it and you want it and that's the sort of thing, I mean, you still got to be mindful of side effects because if the ratios get out. But again, that's something for you and your doctor, and obviously just keep an eye on things. I mean, obviously, even with that, when guys are using that, I actually do like utilizing herbs to actually stop the aromatase of the testosterone.
Absolutely.
And keep it going down the most active pathway. So things like zinc and magnesium, well, zinc specifically is very important. But also using herbs like tribulus, shilajit, other things like that can be really, really beneficial. And I think people think, I should only use that when I come off those things. Yeah. And that's very, very smart.
True, that's good.
And in fact, probably more important, but you can actually use low dose to actually keep it going down the right pathway without it aromatizing.
Absolutely. You don't want to aromatize it too much, or you get this high estrogen men, which is we've talked about.
And last one, and this is from Auntie Alberta, I'm pretty sure. Is it? Yep. So one of our number one podcast fan.
Everybody's auntie.
Yeah, she's everybody. We adopted her. So Hi, Alberta. Is it worthwhile starting estrogen replacement post-menopause? I've read that it's essential for brain function and help to avoid dementia.
That's right.
Thanks,
does.
team. Awesome.
It does. This is one of those vexed issues because as we've talked about HRT now, because is it good? And no, not orally with the tablets, because there was a big study in 2003 where oral hormones, the Premarin, increases strokes and heart disease, because that's not estrogen you find in a woman. In fact, if you take that, you can't measure it in the blood.
Wow.
Because it's not the estrogen that the blood test looks for. So you have to get the natural, what they call BHRT. That's a bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And that's where you can make like a 2% estrogen cream with a 4% progesterone cream and start with that on your forearms and see what happens to your blood levels and increase the percentage or decrease the percentage. And eventually, that's actually, in my opinion, a healthy way to go for women.
Right.
Because at 51, average age for menopause for a woman, they simply can't make the hormones they used to when they were healthy, and it does have adverse effects on their body.
Right.
So natural herbs is terrific. Of course, we've talked about those, particularly the testosterone boosters, if I want to summarize it there.
Yeah.
But
Tribulus, Shilajit, that sort of thing.
but the creams are a great idea. I think they really are. Oral DHEA is good too.
Right.
And that's prescription.
Are you allowed to get, because I know DHEA over the counter is banned here in Australia.
It is in Australia.
But you can always check with your doctor, but you can get prescriptions for DHEA.
In Australia, you can,
doctor.
yeah.
Okay.
It's good. Around about 25 milligrams the way they start off for women who are menopausal. And that makes them feel better because that's a weak androgen and it can be converted into estrogen and progesterone.
Yeah.
And what you don't want to get in this case is 7-keto DHEA.
Yeah, right.
Which is great for fat loss.
Yeah, well, yes. Yes.
Yeah. But you want the actual DHEA because it makes the other hormones.
Yep.
It's interesting, isn't it? So it's vexing, and that's where, medicines can be actually quite beneficial for you long term. You take the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and just match blood levels to where you want them. And that's the simple way to talk about that. And take them with herbs and a good diet and get the microbiome right.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't detoxify your estrogen and you'll end up with too much of it.
Yeah.
Very important. And, the whole estrogen story here is one of a great paper, U-shape. It's all about the right amount. It's not bad in men. In fact, if you haven't got estrogen in men, it causes impotence.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to say. It's the worst thing that can happen to a man. And you got too much of it.
Not the worst.
Well, yeah, I suppose. One of the worst things. But it also screws with your brain in men too. So that's one of the bad. But if you've got too much of it, it screws with your brain and causes impotence as well. So you need the right amount. And that's why a healthy balance, and that's where nature's so good. You're starting supplementing with hormones, you're playing with a little bit of fire, but as long as you're very careful and cautious about it, it can be work benefits for you.
Well, if you're going to go down that path, obviously, well, any path really, you just need to make sure that you've got a good healthcare practitioner, monitor everything, and then make adjustments as you need to.
And use symptoms and all that sort of stuff. And look after yourself, exercise, get out there, do the things, the healthy diets. Don't eat bad and try and fix it with hormones. I've been to a few American conferences that they talk about that. And they don't talk about diet, but they talk about, you got to replace it with this much. It's like, why don't you make your own to start with?
Yeah.
And then supplement.
Yep. Now look for alternatives. Anything else you want to mention?
Look, there's lots of papers here, but we've gone a bit over time. But really, another paper here called "Estrogen: The Necessary Evil for Human Health and Ways to Tame It." It was one of the titles.
They're calling estrogen evil.
Well, if it's too much or too little, it's evil.
Right.
It's all about balance, and healthy lifestyles and a healthy body will bring you back into balance better than anything.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's good. Take those herbs, get your gut right.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I'm off for a prostate exam, so I better get out of here.
Do you want me to do it for you?
No, Steve, no.
Oh, okay.
No. Yes. But anyway, thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll be back next week with some more.
Can't wait.
All right.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.